Hey everybody, welcome to Life is Beautiful. I'm Anthony, and today we are going to be talking about a beer in particular, and that is the Centennial IPA from Founders Brewing in Michigan, I think? I should probably look that up. So when I started Life is Beautiful, I really wanted to dive into the history, the intrigue, the narrative tale behind beer and beer styles and hops and ingredients and everything like that. And I truly do believe in my little, sign off motto or whatever you want to call it of there's a story in every bottle. I truly, genuinely believe that, whether it is a story for the ingredients, a story of the beer itself, the story of the beer style, some aspect of every single beer has some narrative tale that shows some type of shines a light onto beer history in a grander scope. So I started a series called A Story in Every Bottle, where I've picked out particular beers and I told their narrative tale, usually hundreds and hundreds of years of history. But not every beer has that much history to talk about. Some of them are much shorter, especially in the craft world. Founder Centennial IPA being absolutely no exception. However, I still believe that there is a whole lot to uncover on it. So I'm making like a subcategory, another type of video. I'm calling it a message in every bottle. It's like, the smaller itty bitty baby junior version of A Story in Every Bottle. Get it? Founders Centennial IPA is certainly one of the most iconic beers of that early craft beer boom era. This beer was one of the initial flagship offerings that helped convince early craft beer adopters that the IPA was the way to go for the craft beer scene. I mean, this was one of the foundational building blocks that made IPA as big as it is. This could be a starting point for the global phenomenon that IPA became. Back in 1997, when Founders first became established, craft beer was not so much more a way of life as it kind of is now, as it was a bit of like an obscure, oddball, eccentricity for people who were just like really into beer. There wasn't really like beer people then, there was just like small out pockets, certainly not a community. Craft beer on a national scale was just kind of unheard of. It would be hard to convince most American drinkers who were so used to their pale adjunct lagers and maybe the occasional European like Helles or, maybe even an import Pilsner or something like that. Certainly not anything near as hoppy or as aggressive as an IPA. However, craft breweries at this point in time certainly had to appeal to those early adopters who did buy into the more aggressive in-your-face flavor that craftier beers had to offer. And if you go back and listen to some podcasts or interviews with some of the like early flagship brewers, you're always going to hear them say, they had to have something hoppy. They had to have like a pale ale or an IPA. They had to have something dark. They had to have something lighter to kind of draw people in. And that usually came in the form of like a Pilsner or a Helles or maybe an Amber. And a lot of people adopted like old world brewing traditions and brought them over. Anyways, the point was every craft brewer had to have an IPA. Even back then, it was still a staple. So, of course, Founders had to have one too. But there was a little bit of a problem. And that was that their IPA sucked. In fact, by their own words, they called it unremarkable. To truly emphasize how unremarkable their early first IPA really was, Jeremy Kosmicki, the founder and brewer of Founders, he frequently tells this story about how one of his friends was throwing a party, and when his parties came, he was apparently like the party king. He would throw like massive raiders and everybody wanted to come. So wanted to kind of get their brand out there a little bit, they offered to sponsor the beer for the party. They were like, we can probably get a good deal on a full keg from like the actual owners and managers of Founders, and we can probably push that out there. It'd be good publicity and everything like that. The problem was when they actually offered up their IPA to their friend, mind you, the friend said, no thanks, he'll pass. Passing on a free keg of IPA. That's like what, like $80 now? Wow. To make matters worse, not only did he deny the free keg of Founders IPA, he actually chose to pay full price for a competitor's IPA. I mean, that's how bad their IPA must have been. So as you can imagine, this absolutely devastated the guys at Founders. You know, anybody who is like a craftsman or an artisan, they put a lot of, heart, soul, blood, sweat, and tears into their product, and they want it to be respected, or at least appreciated. So for them to be so, devastatedly shut down, I mean, it had to hurt. And it really actually kind of inspired them. Let's take things back to the drawing board and let's figure out, why wouldn't somebody want a free keg of our beer? I think the thing that they really realized is that, sure, having the standard offerings was probably, beneficial, a good business model. I mean, if you're gonna be in a competitive scene, you have to be able to offer at least what your competition's offering if you can't surpass it. But I think what they really realized at that moment was standard offerings weren't going to be enough. They needed to focus on quality. And to achieve this new quality, the Founders Brewers really took everything back to square one. They completely changed up their house yeast strain. They revamped the entire malt bill for their IPA. And the last thing that they needed to do was they really needed to find some type of hop punch that would be able to carry their beer. I mean, even still to this day, IPAs are made and broken by their hop choices. And that's certainly no different back then. So what they ended up doing was they started shopping around, trying to find a hop that had some type of heat behind it, some type of height behind it. And then they also needed to try to figure out ways to utilize it in the proper way. And what they ended up settling on was Centennial. And they also started focusing on late hop additions in order to really enhance that aromatic punch and intermittent between the boil and between the final to really round out the flavor. Now, the choice for choosing Centennial hops as your flagship revamp, that might not sound all too exciting today. However, as I covered in my Centennial hop overview video, Centennial hop in these early craft beer days was seen as a hype hop. I mean, it was the Citra, it was the Galaxy, it was the Motueka, it was the hotness. It was the hop, it was just coming out of the Cascade era, and people were starting to try to find that new Cascade, and Centennial was it. So if they were like, okay, well, let's get our hands on Centennial, that's already going to bring a lot of intrigue. It's going to bring a lot of interest, and genuinely, it is a insanely high quality hop, perfect for American IPAs. So it's going to be mutually beneficial across the board. Check every box. And fortunately for Founders, it was a huge success. I mean, Centennial IPA, it kind of changed the entire game, not only for the IPA sense, but for Founders themselves. I mean, you can hear stories back in the day about how they were facing bankruptcy, they were facing closure and everything. And it was this revamp, which Centennial was certainly a part of, that helped them keep their doors open. Quite literally, if you ever heard the bolt cutter story. And I mean, this revamp with Founders Centennial IPA at the forefront of it, I mean, it's what created a legacy, a historic brewery, a foundational pillar in the craft beer movement, making one of the most successful legacy brewers of all time. I mean, trust me, this beer was phenomenal. In the BJCP guidelines back in the day, this was seen as the example for what American IPAs should be. I mean, the BJCP said this beer is what everyone should aspire to. I can't even fathom being that successful. I mean, I think that speaks for itself, really. But not only was Centennial IPA huge for Founders, it was huge for the craft beer movement, and it was huge for the Centennial hop itself. As I said, it was still kind of growing, and there was some hype and interest behind it, but it certainly wasn't like in every single brewery. But seeing how much this beer was thrust into the forefront of the craft beer scene, all because of the decision to use Centennial hops, I mean, that made an insane cash grab, creating one of the earliest examples of a hype hop that almost if you don't have that in your lineup, you can't survive. It was kind of interesting. I mean, Founders went from chasing the lineup to creating the lineup of what was necessity in craft beer. So that really kind of sums up this story. Very short, just a little message. But I mean, I can't overstate it. This beer changed the trajectory of craft beer and of hop growers. I mean, so much of the industry that we now know and understand today started at the pivot point of somebody not liking a beer and them just buckling down and saying, we can do better. And they did. It's an inspiration story. Founder Centennial IPA is one of the most impactful IPAs to ever come out of anywhere. I mean, you have like the early Burton-on-Trent IPA breweries. You have, the Dark Watch Black IPA. You have Heady Topper. You have Centennial. These are all the legendary IPAs that shaped our modern brewing scene over the past couple hundred years, especially the last 40 or so. So I got to give a huge salute to this beer. I mean, it's incredibly fascinating. It's incredibly interesting that something as innocuous as somebody not wanting to drink your beer could revolutionize everything. It's kind of an inspiration story. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. I really hope you learned just something real quick and simple about the Centennial IPA from Founders. And I don't know, man, doesn't that show? Just even the most shelfie of shelfies has some crazy history and fantastic story in it. So thank you very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Remember, there is a story in every bottle. And remember that life is beautiful. Cheers.